Hi, Eric.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good evening.
I think we can get started. That's interesting.
Is
Yes.
Dapeng joining?
Depeng, I don't believe he's joining, at least, yeah. Okay. Right. Yes, I think it's 8 o'clock. We can get started. So, welcome, folks. Thanks for joining the DMM working group. Myself, Sri Gandavelli, and I'm with Satoru-san. So, this is the agenda for today. Just before we get started, some the rules about the IETF is being run under certain rules and regulations, and these are listed here. These are the IPR. This is the IPR statement. Please review. And this is the Note 12 statement. This meeting is under hosted under certain rules, and these are documented in these specifications. Please review. And blue sheets, please. And I think yeah, this is a virtual meeting, and if you can, somebody can sign up for taking some notes, that will be appreciated. Any volunteers, folks who is here? There are not many folks today. Pablo, do you mind taking the notes, please? Just, it's a short meeting anyways.
Notes.
Yeah, thank you. That's yes, right? Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. Then this is the agenda for the meeting. Today, just a brief update from the last meeting between IETF 109 and 110. We have adopted the following document as a working group document. This is a transport network aware mobility for 5G. We ran the consensus call, and there was good amount of support, and there were a couple of objections, and we gave an opportunity for the authors and the reviewers to address those comments, right? Not much happened. There were mainly two objections, but we didn't get much feedback when we tried to resolve this offline. But we still chose to take up the document as a working document. But we are hoping whatever the objections that were raised will be fixed in the course, between now and between the document becomes is sent to IESG. So that's with that. I think we'll see it in a day or two. That's then followed by, I think, a quick update on the working group documents. These are the active documents. One is on the user plane protocol architecture analysis on the HBB 5G system. And there was a recent update, 04 version. I think this is in a good shape. I think we should be able to, send, issue last call on this. And there's a segment routing IPv6 for mobile user plane. I think a few updates happened between now and the last meeting. And I think this also is completely ready and all the dependencies are met, and we should be able to move this document forward. And then there's the transport aware, network aware, mobility for 5G. As I said, it was adopted as a working document. So we should be able to, over the next few months, we should be able to move this forward. And today is with that, we have two presentations today. One is the architecture discussion on SRv6. This is an individual ID, and Mia-san has presented this in the last meeting as well, but we have not yet issued an adoption call. The plan is once we get few more reviews from the working group, and we will be able to take this up. So I think with that, and then there's the segment routing IPv6 for mobile user plane. There's a quick update on this as well. So these are the two presentations that we have, and that's about it. With that, anything you want to add, Satoru-san?
Not much so far. Thank you, Suri-san.
Okay. Anything from you, Eric?
Nope. I'm just waiting when a working group adopted document comes my way for ED eval. So.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, we'll make that happen. With that, I think let's go back to the. Is Mia there? Mia? Is Mia-san? Yes. Okay. So you're going to do the presentation, Mia-san? Okay. Sorry. Okay. Mia?
Okay, do you hear me?
Yes, please. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much for your time and opportunity. Let me recap the what we'd like to achieve with this draft. So next page, please. So today I'd like to recap the objective and some architectural discussion, and I have some new exemplification and conclusion in next step. Next slide, please. So to recap the objective, this draft discusses a solution approach and its architectural benefits of common data plane across domains and across layers. Background for this is that the current mobility-related discussion in IETF, like network slicing, based on the assumption of the existing domain and the current GTP, which, in my opinion, is not good for future, for considering the new architecture for future. Next, please. So the current connection-intensive network has the limitation that session termination point will be a scaling bottleneck, and the connection-oriented network is not very optimized for edge distributed computing, not optimized for any-to-any communication, and policy and authentication are tied to access methods. And the security model is perimeter security. But for future, next page, please. For future, the network architecture is more data intensive, and we are discussing about distributed mobility. So mobility entities will be distributed, and the computing workload will also be distributed, and access will be getting more heterogeneous, and policy or security will be considered apart from the access method. Next page, please. And as you know, SRv6 is proposed as a common data plane across domains. And by SRv6 net programming, which has now RFC, it can program anything, including overlay functionalities such as GTP, VXLAN, NSH, and it could achieve simple flat architecture, and it can be a common data plane across domains, and for both overlay and underlay, and it can easily interact with applications with scaling and flexibility. So let me have some examples. Next, please. So for edge computing and network slicing, so there will be workload, container pod, and we would like to make the container pod belong to arbitrary tenant or slice, and the network should interact with container pod or applications, and we need a way to control or steer traffic flexibly onto the container pod. So this kind of functionality will be required for edge computing platform, and for make the container pod belong to tenant or slices. Next page, please. And 3GPP discusses a lot of URLC and multipath. So for reliable transport, GTP could be we could have dual GTP tunnel. Also, 3GPP 23793 discusses about multipath access traffic steering switch and splitting support, which is good, but this reliability or multipath convergence should be better not completed within GTP. I think layer 4.7 and application interaction should be more considered. Next, please. So as a conclusion, as mobile architecture entities become more distributed, they have the potential to be integrated as the platform for edge distributed computing and new SLA delivery mechanisms. But for that, it is essential to consider this across domains and across layers. And as I said, the current mobility-related discussion in IETF, like network slicing, are based on the existing assumption that the current domain and the current GTP. So I really want to have DMM working group adopt this document and consider how to make cross domain or across or how to apart from the existing GTP practice. That is what I'd like to discuss with this DMM working group. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Yes. Any questions, comments? Okay, so Miya-san, so what do you want to accomplish from this? Is it a more...
Sorry, Hannu had a question.
Please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so I recognize that the connection-oriented nature of setting up PDU sessions is not optimized for edge computing. That's fair observation. But on the other hand, if you consider where 3GPP is now heading, is that we are now in release 17, and it's building on top of 2 releases already, which are using GTP as the basis for PDU session, for the quality of service, mostly of the management. I would say that changing this at this point would be much too radical to be realistic for 5G. So I'm now wondering that we have in the IETF or IRTF corridors this discussion on 6G. So maybe this is something to discuss over there and change the timeline so that we address 6G rather than try to change something which is already nearly halfway of it exists.
Okay.
That's my comment.
So I think thanks for your feedback. So I think one observation, one comment would be like the DMM working group is not chartered to say we are working only on 4G or 5G or 6G. In general, we are trying to solve the mobility problems, right? I think, sure, I think, for the SRv6 work, the authors tried to push it into the 3GPP release 17 standard, 16, 17, right? It did not happen, but it does not mean that, like, I think, we have to really be under the scope of 5G or 6G. But my point is, if there is an opportunity to push that into future versions of 3GPP, it may be possible. But as long as we solve the right technical problems, right? With that, Hanu, you think, is there something that this working group should do, or you're recommending that this only IRTF should? This is the target. IRTF is the right place for this work.
Good linkage to this IRTF discussions and preparatory discussions. Maybe Dirk Hugo could comment this, because I think he's one of the drivers of this discussions in this 6G interest group of IETF. I think, yeah, that was my comment and observation. I'll leave to you to conclude what is the best place to discuss these matters.
Yeah. Thanks, Hanu. I think in general, I think, if the problem is, interesting enough, if the problem is relevant to mobility architectures, right, 5G, 6G, or any other access architecture, I think in general, I think in my opinion, we should do it here. But again, it's up to the working group and the AD and the amount, participation interest. But I think, I think let's get some more feedback. Any other comments? Any other feedback on this document? Okay, so Mia-san, one question I have, right? I think you talked about the URLLC scenarios in the 3GPP that 3GPP talks about. I assume with SRv6 you're only addressing one of the scenarios, right? Only the network side path redundancy, right? In other words, this is only the one of the scenarios, but not all the URLLC scenarios can be addressed through SRv6. Is that correct?
So sorry, could you say it again, please? Only scenario which SRv6 supports?
Yeah, 3GPP specification supports multiple scenarios for URL, right? In one case, the UE can be connected to 2 different RANs, and potentially there can be an end-to-end reliability, right? That is one of the scenarios, right? Now, then there's the core network redundancy. So my question is, with SRv6, what you're arguing is it's only one of the scenarios you will be able to support, right? Which is the network, which is the redundancy on the network side. Right?
Yeah. Well, yes. So sorry. Thank you for the question. So SRv6 supports any form of redundancy. What I wanted to raise this particular model is that So UE could have dual GTP, which is fine, but this model only has the one connection, and network is going to provide a redundancy. But this model is not very how can I say, efficient, because GTP doesn't have knowledge of underlay. So how to make this diverse path disjoint is lacking from the 3GPP consideration. So this is not very effective. That's why I raised this point.
Mhm.
So
Okay, thank you.
which
Yeah.
doesn't mean that SRv6 only supports this kind of redundancy.
Okay. All right. That helps. Yeah. Any other questions, comments? Otherwise, we can move on to the next topic. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, sorry. I think, yeah, few before. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry, I wanted to just add on to the comments. I also agree that GTP does have limitations in terms of latency, reliability, and all of those things, as Hanu and Sri, all of you have remarked. I did have a couple of questions. I mean, this may be interesting work, but I had a couple of questions that to consider in more specifically. One is, does this impact the control plane on the GTP on the 3GPP side? And if it does, then how do we handle, how do we go forward in a way that, um, you know, does not impact that or reduces the impact, or how do we do that? It's somewhat related to Hanu's comments that, a lot has been developed already for 5G. So this may be something to think about as we move forward. And a second question is more or less about the radio side. They're also using GTP in the distributed, when you distribute between the CU and the DU. That's also GTP based. And in all of these cases, I think there's some control plane information to be considered. So if we decide to go forward, I think that's something that we must look to see that there is no impact, or some way that the impact can be managed. I think that'll be the challenge.
So,
Yeah.
John,
Those are my comments.
Thank you.
yeah, on the second point, right? When you say there is a GTP between the CU and DU, what do you mean by that? Are you talking about the N3, the use of GTP on the N3, or on the
On
VLAN?
the F1
On the
interface.
use of GTP?
Yeah.
Okay, it's truly
But
everything's.
that may be manageable. I think, I haven't looked into how this may, adversely or not affect it, but it may be okay, because I'm not sure. The only the main point would center around the control plane, because a
Right.
control plane is more or less, heavily intertwined into this whole thing, and the control plane is managed, not in the IETF. So that's where I think the challenge will be, and something that we can think about.
Right.
Once we can get past that, maybe there are some interesting ways we can solve for the radio side and the core.
Yeah, thank you
Thanks.
for comments. I think it's a fair comment. And for that purpose, the SRv6 mobile user plane defines the GTP to SRv6 mapping, so that we can insert with preserving the existing control plane. But I wanted to point out that if we don't consider across domains, we don't have a good slicing mechanism, or we don't achieve a good way for edge computing platform. That's why I'd like to how we can consider not tied with the existing practice, which is GTP exists and mobile domain and transport domain is separated.
Yeah, I mean, just a last little bit, I agree with the problem. There is no question that these problems exist. It's only a
Thank
question
you.
of how we manage forward.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Just a very quick.
Yeah, just one comment.
Okay.
Then you can. Yeah. So, but to John's key point, Mia saying you're agreeing that there will be impact to the control plane. In other words, I'm assuming there is impact to this N4 interface. Correct? Is it?
Sorry, Sri.
Will there be impact to the control plane? I'm guessing, right? You need some extensions on the N4 interface. Correct?
Endpoint interface?
Yeah. Do you need extensions? Or will there be any changes on N4 interface?
Yes, I think so. And also N2. Both ends of the tunnel needs to be controlled.
Right.
That is Anu speaking. May I compliment John? Just tiny addition to that so that we get the minutes right. In addition, it's not only F1 interface, it's also XN. And that XN, mentioning XN, which is between these run nodes, that also leads to the question of backwards compatibility if we want to roam to 4G. Of course, we can say that this is next generation network, so we don't need to carry all the heavy things of backwards compatibility. But if we shoot for 5G, we need to have the backwards compatibility at least to 4G.
Okay. Yes, or any other comments?
Yeah, thank you for comments.
Yeah, I think a few things. So for your email, you want this document to be adopted as a working group document, right? Yes,
yes. Since DMM working group should discuss about the distributed mobility, and so.
Okay. So I think one thing we would request the working group is to review this document and provide some feedback, some good points like from Hanu, John, right, and yourself, right. I think we want some more feedback. I think can we request few volunteers to sign up and provide some feedback? Anybody other than the authors, right? Can any of you raise your hands or state that you're willing to review this document? We want some names so that we can capture into the meeting minutes.
Dan, go ahead.
I can provide some feedback.
Okay, is that John?
This is John. Yes, John. Sorry.
Thank you, John. So you're agreeing to review this document. Anybody else, please?
Hanu as well, of course.
Yeah. Thank you, Hanu. That is two. And one more volunteer, please. Anybody else?
Do you guys hear me? I'm trying to say something. My hand is raised, and I thought I was going to go with my question.
No, we are not following the protocol. My apologies. I think we are still, Okay, Daniel, please. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. So I like the document because there's a lot of use case from an operator viewpoint. But Maya, I heard when you were talking about the URLLC use case with GTP not being reliable, or not reliable, but doesn't iterate from convergence. I was just thinking, how is that possible? Because you're starting a GTP from the radio all the way to the packet core before we go with Satoru and other proposition when we stitch GTP with the SAVI6. But just before that, if we do GTP to packet core, then whatever happened in the transport is irrelevant. when I heard about the convergence time for the URLLC requirement, I just don't understand what you meant by that, because technically anything could happen underneath. It's still not, GTP will just follow whatever new path happens in the transport without breaking anything.
Okay.
Yeah, GTP. So for making more reliable, they are thinking to have a dual GTP path. So to replicate the traffic and then merge for ultra reliability. But if they don't control the underlay, then it's not very effective. So my point is to have controllability on underlay, which make the disjoint path effective. So, sorry,
Okay.
do you know what I mean?
Well, I'm not, okay. Maybe I'll write it in the mailing list.
Sorry about that.
No, that's fine.
English.
No, it's fine. You were well understood. I just didn't, it's not how you pronounced it that it doesn't make sense in my mind. It's more the content on itself. But I will write my question in the mailing list, and it would be better for you to answer.
Yeah, thank you very much. It helps a lot.
Yeah, that makes sense, Daniel. Thank you for that. So I think so we have few volunteers signed up, and I think based on the feedback, yes, we can if there is interest, right? But we want some more reviews. I think this is what, if you guys can also ask anybody to review and provide feedback, I think we'll be able to move forward on this document. So with that, thank you, Yasan. Next is a quick update on the architecture discussion on Service 6 mobile user plane. Yeah, am I picking the right document or? Yeah.
I think the other slides just replaced.
Sorry. Yeah, please. Yeah. So Terasan, who is going to present?
I am presenting.
Pablo.
Pablo.
Yeah, Pablo, please. Yeah.
Okay, so many thanks for your time. This is Pablo Camarillo from Cisco. And this is a quick update on the segment routing IPv6 for mobile user plane. Next slide, please. Okay, so as a very brief reminder, what this document is discussing is the applicability of SRv6 to the N3, N9, and N6 interfaces. To this purpose, this document standardizes how the mobile data plane could work. So it's focused only on the data plane. It is presenting two modes for the data plane, the so-called traditional mode and the enhanced mode. And then this document has a set of interworking mechanisms for legacy N3 interfaces, which are still running either IPv4 or IPv6 GTP. Next slide, please. Okay, so very briefly, a bit as a reminder on the content of this document. So on this document, what we have is a bit of the motivation and the background use cases to do this work. Then in section 5, we discussed the traditional mode, which is just basically a pure replacement of GTPU. Then we have a more evolved mode, which is the enhanced mode. In this enhanced mode, basically what we have is that in addition to the overlay, we can also integrate underlay traffic engineering as well as NFV services. So that is the enhanced mode. And then what we are doing is we are presenting a set of interworking mechanisms for an unchanged N3 interface. Okay, these interworking mechanisms They are applicable to both IPv4 and IPv6 GTP interfaces. And we present them as an extension to the enhanced mode, but they are equally applicable to the traditional mode. Then we also have the SRv6 drop-in interworking, which was the work from Arasmin. And then what else? Well, then for the purpose of obviously defining this SRv6 data plane, we are defining a set of SRv6 segment endpoint behaviors, which are defined in section 6. And then we have a few considerations on the control plane, network slicing, and security. Next slide, please. So that's a bit on the draft content. That a bit moving into the history. So the last time we presented an update on this document, it was actually in the IETF in Singapore pre-pandemic. So, well, this draft, the first revision, we posted it in July 2017. It was adopted as a working group item in November 2017. And we've had 10 revisions as a working group document. Together with this document, we had 2 other documents. One of them was the SRv6 mobile proof of concepts, where we were documenting several implementations and proof of concepts for this work, which at the end, we just ended up parking that document, and we brought the implementation part as an appendix to this document. And then we had another document, which is the mobility use cases, where we started documenting the SRv6 use cases in the mobile network. But at the end, there was not a lot of traction within the working group to get them documented. So that document ended parked as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so since Singapore, what have been the changes? Well, in revision 7, we added the drop-in interworking mode, which was the POC that Arasmin did for us. And revision 8, it was just a pure refresh on the document. Then at that time, the working group chairs asked to get some reviewers to the document, and Carlos Jesus reviewed the document. Many thanks, Carlos. So in revision 9, we updated it to address the documents from Carlos. And revision 10, which was just posted right before this IETF, it just has a few typos and editorial clarifications. Next slide, please. Then from a technology status point of view, there were 2 POCs which were previously discussed on this working group. So Sprint did one project which was using Encore, where they actually were capable of demonstrating this SRv6 mobile user plane. So that was Slice team. And then we also had the POC that was actually presented a few IETFs ago from Arasmin, leveraging the OpenAir interface. Aside from that, we also have 2 other open source implementations, one in FDI or BBP, contributed by Tetsuya, many thanks. And then we have a P4 implementation that is also available open source from Kentaro-san. Next slide, please. So the document has been stable for the last 2 years. This document actually had a normative reference on the Spring document on the SRv6 network programming draft, which has been approved on January this year. So given that the document has been stable, there are no significant changes, and we have the implementations, I think that it would be the right time to move forward this document. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Pablo. Any questions, comments?
I have one comment.
Yeah, please, Sadara-san. Yeah.
RFC 8986 opened the behavior code point for SRv6, and this document defines several SRv6 behavior. I think before working group last call, code point allocation would be better.
Can you repeat the last few words, please? Sorry.
Asking AENA to allocate the SRv6 behavior code point.
Oh, okay, got
it's being RFC 8986 already opened the code point space.
Okay, sure. Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Okay, Thank you, Pablo. Yeah, sorry, was there a comment?
I had my hand up. I was going to ask a question, and then I thought for a brief moment Satoru was reading my mind, but now I have to respond to that as well. IONA early allocation, I think it's RFC 7120, is something we could do, but I think maybe it's. I was wondering. The question I was going to ask before that was, has Spring reviewed this document, and does anybody think that the Spring should be notified about this, or at least notified during the DMM group's last call, or?
I think, I believe authors very early did present this in Spring. I'll let them confirm that. But at least from the content that we have, I do not know, Eric, if we need any explicit feedback. But as an FYI, just to see if there are any objections, we can certainly do that. Maybe, if you in your AD capacity, if you can forward that, that will be great. Otherwise, we can do that as well.
Yeah, I think SR-basic behavior code point is first come, first out. So I don't think we need a review from the Spring.
Okay, I haven't checked the the registry there.
Just one comment. So on the first revisions of the document, when it was an individual document, we did send it to a Spring. And indeed, DMM chose to adopt it because we were hesitating between a Spring and DMM. For the last couple of the revisions, the document has not been forwarded to a Spring. So certainly, Eric, maybe one interesting thing that we could do is whenever the document goes into working group last call, maybe we can cross-post it to both a Spring and DMM, if you think that would be helpful. Or we could send it for review earlier to Spring, whatever. But anything work for the author.
Either one of those things I think would be polite for Spring folks. And I'll talk to the Spring AD about early allocation if you want.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
So Eric, to close the AI, are you going to forward the document, or do you want us to do anything there?
I'll follow up with with the chairs, with you and Satoru and Dafeng afterwards.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, Pablo, I think, we will move this forward. I think, I think you guys are pretty much done with this, and we realize that. Thank you so much. Yeah. With that, any other questions, comments from anybody? That was our last presentation. So, Dorisan, you want to add anything?
No, that's what I have, I think.
All right, thanks, everybody. This wraps up our meeting for today. We'll post the meeting minutes, and we'll follow up on action items. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Bye.